Let's be honest, we've all dreamed of that one moment of sweet vindication. That satisfying movie-worthy moment when you get to prove someone who completely wrote you off wrong. Well, today, you're not just going to dream it, you're going to experience it through a story so powerful, it will stick with you for days. This tale is built on a controversial but deeply held belief that true power isn't loud and arrogant, but quiet, hidden, and just waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. This is the ultimate underdog story, but with a plot twist so profound, it changes all the rules. Get ready for a story that proves you should never judge a book by its cover, because it might just be a billion-dollar ledger in disguise. We're about to explore the explosive fallout from that one whisper. Between lecturers, that moment, a powerful professor finds out his student's net worth, and yet, in an unbelievable twist of pride, still treats her like a student. It's a counterintuitive move that sparks an emotional firestorm you won't see coming. This is a story about how a single moment of public humiliation kicks off an incredible journey of redemption, kindness, and a surprising love story. In one corner, we have Professor Brandon Reynolds, a celebrated academic titan. As brilliant as he is arrogant, a man who believes he has everyone figured out. In the other, Neve Howard, a quiet, unassuming student who seems perfectly ordinary. But Neve is harboring a world-changing secret. She is a billionaire, hiding her immense fortune to finally be seen for her intellect alone. Their two worlds are about to collide in a lecture hall, and the shockwave will change both of them forever. You're about to get a front-row seat to the ultimate plot twist. So what can you expect on this journey? Prepare for a true emotional roller coaster. We will start by plunging you into a moment of shocking public humiliation that will make you feel the sting of injustice right alongside our hero. Then, we'll lift you up with secret acts of kindness and the budding of an unexpected love story. We will make you root for the overcoming of impossible odds, and finally, we will deliver a climax so full of surprise and redemption that it will leave you absolutely speechless. This isn't just a narrative, it's a heart-aching experience. Before we dive into this incredible story, let us know in the comments what beautiful city you're watching from. We want to see how far our story has reached. And please, take a moment to like this video, follow our channel so you don't miss more heart-aching stories like this, and share it with at least one person who you think will be touched by this powerful message of overcoming and surprise. You know, sometimes the biggest shifts in life don't announce themselves with a thunderclap. Nah, they often begin with a simple whisper, a single moment that seems insignificant at the time. For Professor Brandon Reynolds, that moment arrived on a Tuesday under the harsh fluorescent lights of a lecture hall. He stood at the podium, a figure of academic authority, completely unaware that his world was about to be turned upside down. The student in the third row, Neve Howard, was just another face in the crowd, or so he thought. Little did he know, he was speaking to the university's secret billionaire benefactor. Brandon, in his element, posed a challenging question to the sea of young minds before him. It was a complex problem, one designed to separate the truly brilliant from the merely diligent. He scanned the room, his gaze a silent challenge. Who, he began, his voice dripping with condescending intellect, can possibly deconstruct this economic paradox for us? His eyes, almost by chance, landed on Neve. There was a quiet intensity about her that, for some reason, irritated him that day. It was a foolish, fleeting impulse, but one that would set a surprising destiny in motion for both the professor and the student. "Miss Howard," he called out, the name foreign on his tongue. "You seem contemplative. Surely you have a groundbreaking thought to share with us all." The sarcasm was thick enough to cut with a knife. He was putting her on the spot, a classic Brandon Reynolds move meant to assert dominance. He fully expected her to stammer, to shrink under the weight of 100 pairs of eyes. What he didn't expect was the calm, steady gaze she returned, a flicker of something unreadable behind her eyes. This interaction was far more than a simple classroom challenge. It was the first thread in a much larger, more emotional tapestry. The air grew thick with tension. Students shifted uncomfortably, knowing the professor's reputation all too well. To be singled out by him was rarely a good thing. It was often a prelude to public humiliation. Neve, however, didn't flinch. She simply held his gaze, a silent conversation passing between them. He saw a defiant student. He was completely blind to her real net worth and the incredible power she held. This wasn't just about a question in a lecture. It was about pride, prejudice, and a secret that was powerful enough to change everything at the university. And so, it began. Not with a bang, but with a question. Professor Brandon Reynolds, a man who prided himself on knowing everything, was standing on the precipice of a revelation that would shatter his reality. He thought he was teaching a lesson to a simple student, but in reality, destiny was teaching him. The plot twist was already in motion, a silent gear turning in the grand machinery of their lives. He was about to learn a profound lesson in kindness and humility, one that no textbook could ever provide. He leaned forward, a smirk playing on his lips, convinced of his victory in this small, insignificant power play. "Well, Miss Howard, we're all waiting," he pressed, savoring the moment. He was a celebrated academic, after all, a titan in his field whose lectures were legendary. Challenging a seemingly average student was nothing to him. But this single public challenge was the catalyst for an unbelievable love story, a tale of overcoming and redemption that would become the stuff of campus legend. He just didn't know it yet. To truly understand Professor Brandon Reynolds, you have to look beyond the titles and accolades. He wasn't just a professor, he was an institution, a pillar of intellectual rigor in a world he often felt was growing. Soft, his brilliance was undeniable, a beacon that drew the brightest students to his lectures, all eager to learn from a master. But man, that brilliance came with a cost. He demanded perfection because he gave nothing less himself. His classroom was a crucible, designed to forge intellects, but it often felt more like a battlefield to the average student. His aloof nature was the stuff of campus legend. He'd walk through the halls with a storm cloud of concentration around him, rarely making eye contact, lost in a world of complex theories and groundbreaking ideas. This wasn't born of malice, you see, but of an obsessive focus. He believed that coddling students was a disservice to their potential. The real world wouldn't hold their hand, so why should he? This philosophy, however, built a wall around him, making him respected but not particularly liked. It was a lonely kind of greatness, and he was the undisputed king of that isolated kingdom. He viewed his students not as people, but as intellectual challenges, puzzles to be solved or discarded. This emotional distance was his armor, protecting him from the messy, unpredictable nature of human connection. It allowed him to be objective, to judge work on pure merit without the pesky interference of feelings. A student's personal struggles were to him irrelevant data points that had no place in the pure equation of academic success. This rigid mindset made him an exceptional academic, but a deeply flawed mentor, a fact he was blissfully unaware of. The irony, of course, was that while he was a master of understanding complex systems, he was a complete novice at understanding people. He could predict market trends with stunning accuracy, but couldn't read the feeling in a room to save his life. This blind spot was his Achilles heel. He saw Neve Howard as just another student, perhaps a bit more defiant than most, but ultimately unremarkable. He had no clue that his entire professional destiny was now linked to this very person he was so quick to dismiss. His demanding nature was a double-edged sword. It pushed the best to become even better, creating a legacy of high achievers who credited his unforgiving methods for their success. Yet, for every success story, there were countless others who were left feeling small and inadequate, their confidence shattered by his impossibly high standards. He created warriors, but he also left casualties. This was the complex legacy of the great Professor Reynolds, a man who could inspire genius and despair in the very same breath, often without noticing the difference. And so, his reputation preceded him, a brilliant but cold professor, a lone wolf of academia. He was comfortable in his predictable world of facts and figures, of lectures and research. He didn't know that the greatest variable of his life, a secret billionaire with a heart full of quiet strength, was sitting in his class. The carefully constructed walls of his world were about to be tested by a force he couldn't analyze or predict. A plot twist that was already quietly unfolding. Now let's talk about Neve Howard. To understand her, you have to understand the weight of a name, the crushing gravity of a massive net worth. From the moment she was born, she was not just a person, but an heiress, a living symbol of a vast fortune. People didn't see her, they saw dollar signs. They didn't listen to her ideas, they calculated the value of her connections. This wasn't life, it was a gilded cage, and she was desperate to prove she was more than the gold that lined its bars. That's why she kept her identity a complete secret. So she made a radical choice. She enrolled in the university under a simplified version of her name, with a backstory so deliberately ordinary it was practically invisible. She traded couture for jeans, chauffeured cars for the city bus, and gala dinners for late-night study sessions in the library. She wanted, for the first time in her life, to be a regular student. She craved the simple, terrifying, and honest experience of being judged for her mind alone. She wanted to know if her ideas had merit without the billion-dollar safety net. This secret was her shield and her liberation. It allowed her to walk among her peers, to engage in debates, to succeed or fail on her own terms. It was a thrilling and terrifying experiment in authenticity. Every high grade she earned felt like a true victory, a piece of her identity she had forged for herself. Every nod of approval from a professor was a treasure, untainted by the knowledge of her family's influence. This was the life she chose, a quiet rebellion against the destiny that had been written for her. Of course, keeping the secret of this magnitude wasn't easy. It required constant vigilance and a level of humility that was completely at odds with her upbringing. She learned to bite her tongue when classmates complained about student loans, to feign surprise at prices she wouldn't have blinked at before. It was a constant performance, but the payoff was invaluable, genuine human connection. She was making real friends, having real arguments, and for the first time, feeling like a real person, not just a billionaire in hiding. Her decision to enroll in Professor Brandon Reynolds' class was deliberate. He was known as the toughest, most impartial mind on campus. If she could earn his respect, the respect of a man who famously cared for nothing but pure intellect, then she would know she had truly succeeded. He was the ultimate test. She wasn't interested in his approval as a benefactor, she wanted his validation as a student. It was a deeply personal mission, a silent act of overcoming her own gilded shadow. But in a world that so often judges a book by its cover, her quiet and unassuming nature was bound to be misinterpreted. She sought intellectual validation, but in the aggressive arena of Brandon's classroom, her gentle demeanor could easily be mistaken for weakness. She was setting the stage to prove her worth, completely unaware that this very quest would lead to a moment where she felt utterly humiliated, pushing her and the professor toward an unexpected destiny. The day it happened, the classroom was electric. The debate was fierce, a complex dance of economic theories that had the best students on the edge of their seats. This was Brandon's arena, and he was a master gladiator. Neve, feeling a surge of confidence, saw an angle everyone was missing, a subtle flaw in the prevailing argument. It was a brilliant point, one that connected two disparate theories in a way that was both elegant and profound. Taking a deep breath, she raised her hand, her heart thumping with a mix of fear and excitement. When Brandon called on her, she laid out her argument with quiet clarity. For a fleeting moment, A hush fell over the room as students processed the sheer ingenuity of her point. It was a perspective that reframed the entire debate. But Professor Reynolds, blinded by his own intellectual arrogance and his preconceived notion of her as an unremarkable student, didn't see brilliance. He saw an interruption. He saw a student stepping out of her perceived place, and his reaction was swift and merciless. "Miss Howard," he began, his voice dripping with patronizing dismissal. "That is a quaintly simplistic observation. Perhaps we should leave the heavy intellectual lifting to those who have a firmer grasp of the basics." The words hung in the air, sharp and cruel. He didn't just disagree with her, he belittled her, reducing her insightful comment to child's play. In that one sentence, he humiliated her in front of every single one of her peers, the very people she had worked so hard to be seen by as an equal. The sting of it was sharp and deeply emotional. The color drained from Neve's face. The other students quickly looked away, a mixture of pity and secondhand embarrassment filling the room. She had offered a piece of her true self, the intellect she valued so highly, and he had shattered it with casual disdain. It was a heart-aching moment of public shame. She lowered her head, the fire in her eyes replaced by a deep, quiet hurt. This wasn't just about being wrong, it was about being made to feel worthless. And it was a feeling this secret billionaire was not accustomed to. The wound was deeper than Brandon could ever imagine. It wasn't just a professor dismissing a student, it was a rejection of the one thing Neve desperately wanted to be valued. For all her efforts to hide her net worth, to live an authentic life, felt like a sham in that moment. What was the point of being a mind if the most brilliant man she knew saw it as nothing? This act, meant to put a student in her place, was a pivotal plot twist, setting in motion a chain of events that would lead to both redemption and surprise. She sat in silence for the rest of the lecture, the professor's words echoing in her ears. The humiliation was a bitter pill to swallow. But beneath the hurt, a different feeling began to smolder resilience. He had underestimated her, and that was a mistake. As she watched him wrap up his lecture, basking in his intellectual superiority, she couldn't help but feel that this wasn't over. She just happened to be in the right place at the right time to see a side of him he didn't show the classroom. Later that week, seeking a quiet place to study, Neve found herself in a deserted corridor near the faculty offices. It was late, the campus quiet. It was then that she heard voices coming from the dean's office, the door slightly ajar. One voice was pleading, filled with a passion and vulnerability she couldn't have imagined. It was Professor Brandon Reynolds. He wasn't the arrogant, condescending academic from the lecture hall. This was a different man entirely, a man fighting for a dream. She found herself frozen, an accidental fly on the wall to a deeply private moment. He was pitching a groundbreaking research project, something that could genuinely change the world. His voice, usually so cold and measured, was alive with excitement and hope. He spoke of new possibilities, of helping people, of pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. It was a beautiful, heart-aching display of his true passion, the fire that fueled his difficult exterior. For the first time, Neve saw the man behind the fearsome professor, and she found herself captivated by his vision. He wasn't just smart, he was a visionary. Then came the dean's voice, tired and regretful. "Brandon, it's brilliant. It's Nobel Prize brilliant, but the budget, it's just not there. We're talking about a massive investment, the kind of money we'd only see from a major donation." The finality in the dean's tone was like a door slamming shut. The hope in Brandon's voice just moments before was extinguished, replaced by a heavy, defeated silence. To get so close to a dream only to have it snatched away by financial reality was a cruel kind of fate. Neve's heart ached for him. She, the student he had so casually humiliated, was now the sole witness to his own moment of professional defeat. The irony was almost too much to bear. He needed a billionaire, a benefactor with deep pockets and a belief in the impossible. And a secret billionaire was standing right outside the door, her own identity a ticking time bomb of a plot twist. She held the power to make his dream a reality, a power he was completely oblivious to. Destiny, it seemed, had a wicked sense of humor. She overheard him arguing, his voice now strained. "There has to be a way," he insisted. But the dean was firm. "Unless a miracle falls from the sky, Brandon, this project is dead on arrival. A miracle." The word hung in the air, echoing in Neve's mind. She, Neve Howard, could be that miracle. The student he saw as intellectually inferior possessed a net worth that could fund his life's work 10 times over. The power dynamic between them had shifted in that instant, even if only she knew it. Slipping away before she could be discovered, Neve's mind was racing. The sting of her public humiliation was still there, but it was now mixed with a complex, new emotion. She had seen behind the curtain. She had seen his passion and his pain. This new knowledge changed everything. It gave her an idea, a new way to test the man who had so wrongly judged her. He thought she was just a student, but she was about to become a part of his story in a way he could never predict. Still smarting from her dismissal in the debate and armed with the secret knowledge of his funding woes, Neve walked into the next class with a new sense of purpose. Brandon, for his part, seemed to have zeroed in on her. Perhaps he saw her quietness as a challenge, or maybe he wanted to hammer home his point about intellectual superiority. Whatever the reason, he decided to test her. He assigned her a research task so difficult it was borderline cruel, a problem that had stumped graduate students. He expected her to fail, to come back to him humbled and defeated. The assignment was a beast. It required sifting through mountains of dense data, finding a pattern no one else had, and proposing a solution that was both creative and viable. It was, essentially, a miniature version of the very project he had pitched to the dean. He was unknowingly asking the one person who could fund his dream to solve its foundational problem. The irony was poetic. For Neve, this wasn't just homework, it was an opportunity. An opportunity for a little quiet redemption. She took the file from him with a simple nod, her calm demeanor giving no hint of the storm of ideas already brewing. In her mind, she dove into the work with a ferocity no one at that university knew she possessed. For 3 days, she barely slept, fueled by coffee and a burning desire to prove him wrong. This wasn't about the grade anymore. This was personal. She wasn't just completing the task, she was dismantling it, rebuilding it from the ground up. She saw connections he had missed, pathways he hadn't considered. She didn't just solve his problem, she took his original premise and elevated it to a level of genius that was simply breathtaking. When she handed him the completed report, it was with that same infuriatingly calm expression. Brandon took it, a smug look on his face, ready to find the inevitable flaws. He opened the folder in his office later that day, expecting to spend 5 minutes writing a failing grade. An hour later, he was still sitting there, the papers spread across his desk, his coffee gone cold. He was utterly, completely stunned. It wasn't just good, it was perfect. No, it was better than perfect. It was a work of pure, unadulterated brilliance, a total surprise. He read it again, and then a third time, searching for any sign of plagiarism. Any hint that she hadn't done it herself. There was none. The voice, the logic, the creative leap it was all original. A student, this quiet, unassuming student he had humiliated, had not only met his impossible standard, but had surpassed it. She had improved upon his idea. The shock to his system was profound. It was a direct hit to his ego, his worldview, and his judgment as a professor. He sat back in his chair, his mind reeling. Who was Neve Howard? The question echoed in the silent office. He couldn't reconcile the timid student from his class with the intellectual giant who had produced this report. It didn't make sense. For the first time, A seed of doubt was planted in his mind. He had been so sure of his judgment, so certain of his ability to assess a student's worth. But this changed things. He was secretly stunned, and a tiny crack had appeared in the fortress of his pride. While Brandon was wrestling with his shattered perceptions, Neve was moving on to a different kind of project. During her late-night study sessions, she had befriended another student, a brilliant young man whose potential was being crippled by financial hardship. He was working 2 jobs to stay in school, constantly exhausted, his grades beginning to slip. She saw his struggle, and it struck a chord deep within her. Here was a mind worth investing in, a life that could be changed with a simple act of kindness. She could have just given him the money, of course, but that wasn't her way. It would draw attention, create an uncomfortable dynamic. Instead, she decided to act from the shadows, a place she was becoming increasingly comfortable in. She contacted the dean's office, expressing her wish to fund a new anonymous scholarship. The amount was significant, enough to cover full tuition and living expenses for one deserving student. The only condition was that her identity as the benefactor remained a complete secret. The faculty was, to put it mildly, puzzled. Large, anonymous donations were not unheard of, but one so specific and sudden, with no fanfare or desire for recognition, was a genuine surprise. They scrambled to select the most deserving candidate, and unsurprisingly, the choice fell upon Neve's struggling friend. The young man was called into the dean's office, expecting the worst, only to be told that his financial worries were over. His reaction was one of pure, unadulterated joy and disbelief, an emotional, heart-aching moment of pure grace. The news of the Guardian Angel Scholarship, as the students began to call it, spread across campus. It became a beacon of hope, a story of unexpected kindness in a world that often felt competitive and cold. It was a mystery that everyone loved, a puzzle with a beautiful solution. Who was this secret benefactor who sought no credit, only the satisfaction of helping another? The act spoke of a deep-seated generosity, a quiet power being wielded for good. No one, least of all Professor Reynolds, connected it to a student in his class. For Neve, watching her friend walk through campus with a new lightness in his step, free from the crushing weight of financial stress, was a reward far greater than any public acknowledgement. This was the true power of her net worth. It wasn't about buying yachts or mansions, it was about this: the ability to fundamentally change someone's destiny for the better. It was an act of quiet redemption, not for any sin she had committed, but for the unfairness of the world itself. This act of kindness, however, had an unintended consequence. It created a buzz, a new mystery on campus about a powerful, hidden figure. The faculty was intrigued, the dean was grateful, and the students were inspired. This anonymous donor was becoming a campus legend. It was a beautifully kept secret, but secrets, especially those involving a powerful billionaire, have a way of creating ripples that eventually lead back to the source, often in most surprising of ways. The annual Board of Trustees meeting was always a stressful time on campus, and for Brandon, it was doubly so. His parents, formidable figures in the world of finance and philanthropy, were influential members of the board. They were sharp, powerful, and held expectations for their son that were as high as the skyscrapers their company built. He was walking with them across the main quad, enduring their usual critique of university policy, when the unthinkable happened. His mother stopped dead in her tracks, her face breaking into a wide, genuine smile. "Neve, darling, what on earth are you doing here?" she exclaimed, her voice filled with a warmth Brandon had rarely heard directed at anyone outside their immediate family. Brandon followed her gaze and his blood ran cold. She was looking directly at Neve Howard, his quiet, confounding student, who was sitting on a bench reading a book. The world tilted on its axis. His mother, a woman who could make CEOs tremble, was striding towards a student with the familiarity Of a beloved aunt. Neve looked up and a calm, polite smile graced her lips. "Eleanor Charles, it's so good to see you," she said, her tone respectful but completely at ease. She stood and shook his father's hand, who greeted her with a level of deference that was simply staggering. "We didn't know you were taking courses here, my dear," his father said. "Your family should have told us. We would have rolled out the red carpet." This single interaction was a plot twist more shocking than anything Brandon could have imagined. Brandon just stood there, speechless, a statue of pure confusion. His parents, the powerful Reynolds dynasty, greeting his student like she was royalty? It made absolutely no sense. He tried to process the scene. Neve Howard, the girl had humiliated, the student whose genius report he still couldn't fathom, was on a first-name basis with his own family. The surprise was so profound it felt like a physical blow. Who was she? What was this secret connection? His mind, usually so adept at finding patterns, was drawing a complete blank. His mother turned to him, her smile unwavering. "Brandon, you know Neve, of course. She's one of the Howards." The name hit him like a lightning bolt. The Howards? The industrial titan family whose net worth was the stuff of legends? The family whose philanthropic endeavors dwarfed even his own family's? It couldn't be. The quiet, unassuming student in his class was part of that family, a billionaire heiress. The pieces of the puzzle were flying at him, but they were forming a picture he couldn't yet accept. He managed a weak, stammering nod, his entire perception of her shattered into a million pieces. The girl in his class was not a simple student. She was a power player, a secret billionaire hiding in plain sight. The humiliation had dished out, the impossible task had set Herod, all took on a horrifying new context. He had been playing checkers while she was playing a game of chess he didn't even know existed. His confusion was absolute, but it was quickly being replaced by a dawning, sickening realization he had made a terrible, terrible mistake. The shock from the encounter with his parents lingered for days, festering in Brandon's mind. His prejudice was at war with the unbelievable truth. He couldn't reconcile the quiet student with the powerful heiress. So when Neve submitted her final project for the semester, his mind was already primed for disbelief. The project wasn't just good, it was a masterpiece of academic work, a paper so insightful and revolutionary that it could have been published in any major journal tomorrow. It was a work of pure, unadulterated genius. And Brandon's already fractured ego couldn't handle it. It was simply too much. First the brilliant report, now this magnum opus. And the revelation of her family? It all swirled into a toxic cocktail of denial and suspicion. He convinced himself that it was impossible. No student, not even the brightest one, could produce work of this caliber on their own. The idea that Neve Howard, the student he had personally underestimated, could be that brilliant was a truth too bitter for him to swallow. So he chose another, uglier truth. In his office, with her project lying on the desk between them like an indictment, he confronted her. He didn't ask questions. He didn't inquire about her process. He simply accused. "This is an impressive piece of work, Miss Howard," he began, his voice cold and hard as steel. "So impressive, in fact, that I don't believe for a second that you wrote it," referring this to the Academic Integrity Board for plagiarism. The accusation was a declaration of war, his final, desperate attempt to hold onto his shattered worldview. He expected tears, denials, a panicked defense. He wanted to see her crumble to prove his suspicions right. Instead, Neve stood there, her expression not one of guilt, but of deep, profound disappointment. The accusation was a far deeper wound than the public dismissal in class. Back then, he had insulted her intelligence. Now he was attacking her honor, her very integrity. He had accused her of cheating, of being a fraud. It was the ultimate insult, delivered by the professor whose respect she had once so desperately craved. The accusation wasn't really about the paper. It was about him. It was the lashing out of a man whose pride couldn't accept that he had been so spectacularly wrong about a student. He couldn't believe a normal student was capable of such work, and even knowing she wasn't normal, his prejudice wouldn't allow him to credit her. He was so blinded by his own biases that he chose the most destructive explanation possible. He was so determined to prove she wasn't special that he missed the truth right in front of him. He looked at her, expecting a confession, but saw only a quiet, unshakable strength. The silence in the room was heavy, filled with the weight of his false accusation and her silent dignity. He had pushed her, humiliated her, and now he had insulted her in the most profound way. He thought this would be the end of it, the moment. He was proven right. But this confrontation was another major plot twist, one that would force him to look not at her, but at himself, and the ugliness he found there would be the beginning of a long road to redemption. Faced with the gravest accusation a student can receive, Neve didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry or protest wildly. She simply met Professor Reynolds' hard gaze with a look of profound, sorrowful clarity. "You are mistaken, Professor," she said. Her voice quiet, but as solid as bedrock. There was no defiance in her tone, only an unshakable certainty in her own truth. The sheer dignity of her response was more powerful than any loud denial could have ever been. It was a heart-aching display of inner strength. She then calmly and methodically walked him through her entire research process. She explained her initial hypothesis, the dead ends she encountered, the moment of breakthrough in the library at 3 a.m. She cited her sources from memory, not just the books, but the specific chapters and paragraphs that inspired her thinking. She deconstructed her own genius work with such effortless command that it was impossible to doubt its authenticity. She wasn't just defending her paper, she was laying her brilliant mind bare for him to see. Brandon listened, his arms crossed, his expression a mask of stern authority. But underneath, for the very first time, he felt the foundations of his own judgment begin to crumble. Her quiet dignity was a force of nature, chipping away at his certainty. Every logical point she made, every detail she recalled with perfect precision, was a blow to his accusation. He had come in expecting a liar and was faced with undeniable truth. The student he had branded a cheat was defending her integrity with a grace he had never witnessed before. The silence that followed her explanation was deafening. There was nothing more to say. She had proven her case beyond any shadow of a doubt, not with hysterics, but with irrefutable facts and a quiet strength that was frankly intimidating. The tables had turned completely. He was the one who looked foolish, his accusation now hanging in the air like a foul odor, exposed as the product of his own prejudice and pride. He had set out to humiliate her, and had only succeeded in humiliating himself. "I will, of course, cooperate fully with any investigation from the board," she concluded, her voice still even. "I have all my notes, drafts, and research logs. They will support what I've told you." She wasn't asking for his belief anymore, she was stating a fact. The quiet power in that statement was immense. She was unbowed, unshaken, and utterly in command of the situation. She was a student, yes, but in that moment, she was the one with all the power. As she turned and walked out of his office, leaving him alone with her masterpiece of a project and his own ugly assumptions, Brandon felt a profound sense of shame wash over him. It was a cold, sickening feeling he wasn't used to. He had been wrong, not just wrong about the paper, but wrong about her from the very beginning. For the first time, Professor Brandon Reynolds, the man who was always so certain, began to seriously question his own judgment. The journey to his redemption had just taken its most painful and most necessary first step. Neve walked away from that office not with anger, but with a strange sense of clarity. She had seen the man at his worst, blinded by pride and prejudice, but she had also seen him at his most passionate, fighting for a project that could do so much good. The accusation hurt deeply, but her spirit of kindness was stronger than her desire for revenge. She realized she held the power to teach him a lesson far more profound than any public shaming could. She could teach him about grace. It was a choice that would alter both their destinies. Later that week, the dean received an email that made him nearly fall out of his chair. It was from a secure, anonymous address, the same one used for the Guardian Angel Scholarship. The message was simple and direct. The anonymous donor was willing to fully fund Professor Brandon Reynolds' groundbreaking research project. The entire amount he had requested, plus a contingency fund. All of it. The miracle he had spoken of had not just fallen from the sky, it had kicked the door down. The donation came with only one non-negotiable condition. The donor had been following his work for some time and believed in his vision. Therefore, Professor Brandon Reynolds himself must lead the project. He could not be replaced or reassigned. The funding was tied directly to him. This stipulation was a stroke of genius. It wasn't a punishment, but a challenge. A challenge for him to live up to the passion she had secretly witnessed, to become the man his brilliant project deserved him to be. This act of anonymous kindness was the ultimate plot twist in their story. She, the student he had accused of being a fraud, was now the secret benefactor behind his wildest dream. She was investing in the very man who had tried to tear her down. It was a power move, yes, but one born not of ego, but of an incredible capacity for forgiveness. She was giving him everything he ever wanted, without him ever knowing who to thank. It was a heart-aching act of quiet, immense power. The dean was, of course, ecstatic. The university's future, its prestige, was suddenly looking brighter than ever. He couldn't wait to deliver the news. The secret billionaire on campus had struck again, this time on a massive scale. Her quiet presence was reshaping the institution. From the inside out, her net worth being used not for glory, but for genuine progress. She was a silent force, her actions speaking volumes more than any name on a building ever could. And so, the trap of kindness was set. Neve had made her move, a move that would force Brandon to confront his own demons. He was about to receive the best news of his professional life, a gift from an unknown source. He would be filled with gratitude toward a mysterious, benevolent figure. Little did he know, that figure was the very student whose integrity he had just attacked. The path to his redemption was now paved, and he was about to start walking it, completely unaware of who had laid the bricks. The dean called Brandon into his office with a gravity that made him expect the worst. He thought it was about Neve's formal complaint, the impending academic integrity hearing he had so foolishly initiated. Instead, the dean's face broke into the widest grin Brandon had ever seen. He delivered the news of the anonymous donation, the full funding, the single condition that he must lead the project. Brandon just stared, unable to process the words. It wasn't a reprimand, it was a dream come true. A complete and utter surprise. The joy that flooded him was overwhelming, a pure, unadulterated ecstasy that washed away the shame and confusion of the past few weeks. His project, his life's work, was alive, it was real. Someone out there, some unknown, benevolent force, believed in him so much that they made the impossible happen. The gratitude he felt was immense, a powerful, emotional wave that humbled him to his core. For the first time in a long time, Professor Brandon Reynolds felt not pride, but a profound sense of being blessed. This gratitude began to work a subtle magic on him. The hard edges of his personality started to soften. The constant simmering frustration with the world's inadequacies was replaced by a quiet sense of wonder and responsibility. He had a duty, now not just to his own ambition, but to the mysterious benefactor who had placed such incredible faith in him. This act of kindness from a stranger began a process of inner transformation, the first step in a Lungo Verdu redemption. His demeanor in the classroom began to change. The biting sarcasm was replaced by a more patient, encouraging tone. He started to see his students not as adversaries to be bested, but as collaborators on a shared journey of discovery. He even cracked a joke once or twice, much to the shock of the entire student body. The fearsome Professor Reynolds was melting, his harsh exterior giving way to the passionate, visionary man Neve had overheard in the dean's office. He became obsessed with the identity of his benefactor. Who was this person? Why choose him? He would often find himself staring out his office window, wondering about this secret angel. The mystery consumed him, but in a good way. It made him want to be a better man, a man worthy of such a gift. His gratitude wasn't just a feeling, it was a catalyst for real, tangible change in his character. He was being reshaped by an act of kindness from a person he didn't even know. Of course, the irony was thick enough to swim in. The person he was so grateful to, the anonymous figure he was placing on a pedestal, was the very student he continued to see in his class every day. He was directing all his newfound warmth and respect out into the universe, completely unaware that its intended recipient was sitting in the third row, watching his transformation with a quiet, knowing smile. The plot twist was still her secret to keep. With his demeanor softened by gratitude, Brandon's entire perception of the world began to shift. It was as if he had been looking at life through a distorted lens that was now clearing. And as it cleared, his gaze inevitably fell upon Neve Howard. Freed from the prison of his own prejudice, he started to see her for who she truly was. He remembered the genius of her projects, the quiet dignity of her defense against his accusation, and the unshakable calm she possessed. He had seen these things before, but now he was truly seeing them. Their interactions, once fraught with tension and his own condescension, became something new. When she spoke in class, he listened, really listened. He found himself genuinely impressed by her sharp mind, the elegant way she constructed her arguments, the unique perspective she brought to every discussion. He started calling on her not to challenge her, but because he was genuinely curious to hear what she had to say. A newfound respect was blooming, replacing the suspicion that had clouded his judgment for so long. He found himself seeking her out for brief chats after class, ostensibly to discuss academic matters, but really, he was just drawn to her calm spirit. In a world of academic stress and ego, her serenity was like a quiet harbor he had once mistaken. Her silence for a lack of intelligence, now he understood it was a sign of incredible strength. She didn't need to be the loudest person in the room to be the smartest. This realization was a profound lesson in humility for the arrogant professor. One afternoon, he apologized. It wasn't a grand public spectacle, but a quiet, sincere moment in the hallway. "Miss Howard Neve," he began, stumbling over the words. "I was wrong. About your project. About everything. My behavior was inexcusable." The apology was a massive step in his journey of redemption. He expected her to be dismissive or cold, but she simply nodded, offering a small, forgiving smile. "Thank you, Professor," she said, and in that moment, he felt a weight lift that he didn't even know he was carrying. This newfound respect was slowly, subtly, rewiring their entire dynamic. The labels of professor and student began to feel insufficient to describe the complex connection growing between them. He saw a brilliant peer, a person of incredible integrity, and dare he admit it, a profoundly calming presence in his life. He was seeing the woman he had refused to see before, and he was captivated. He was beginning to appreciate the very qualities he had once so arrogantly overlooked. He was still completely in the dark about her biggest secret, her role as his benefactor. He respected her mind, but he had no clue about her net worth or the fact that she was the architect of his current happiness. He was falling for the person, completely unaware of her power. This growing admiration was pure, based solely on who she was in that classroom and in those quiet hallway conversations. And it was paving the way for something far deeper and more emotional to take root. Respect is a funny thing. It can often be the fertile ground where more delicate feelings begin to grow. For Brandon, his profound respect for Neve's mind and spirit started to morph into something else, something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He found his thoughts drifting to her outside of class, replaying their conversations, remembering the way she would tilt her head when she was deep in thought. These were small, insignificant details, yet they were starting to occupy a significant amount of his mental real estate. He was drawn to her quiet strength, the very quality he had once dismissed as weakness. He admired her resilience in the face of his own terrible behavior, her ability to meet cruelty with grace. These weren't just the qualities of a good student. They were the qualities of an extraordinary person. He was developing feelings for her, a slow-burning realization that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The arrogant professor was, much to his own surprise, falling in love. This blossoming love story was a secret he kept even from himself at first. He tried to rationalize his feelings as mere academic admiration, but there was no denying the way his heart would beat a little faster when she walked into the room, or the genuine smile that would break across his face when she answered a question brilliantly. Professor Brandon Reynolds, a man who dealt in facts and figures, was hopelessly lost in the beautiful, illogical world of human emotion. What made it all so potent was the purity of it. He was falling for Neve Howard, the student. Not the heiress, not the secret billionaire, not his benefactor. He was falling for the person he had gotten to know, the woman whose intellect challenged him and whose spirit calmed him. It was a love based on character and connection, completely untainted by the knowledge of her immense wealth and power. It was the most authentic thing he had felt in years, and the irony was, it was all wrapped in a giant secret. He started to hope for a future that went beyond the classroom, a destiny that might intertwine their lives in a more personal way. The thought was audacious. He was her professor, and the power dynamic was already complicated enough. But the heart wants what it wants, and his heart was increasingly, undeniably, pointing toward Neve. It was a heart-aching and deeply personal journey of overcoming his own prejudices to find an unexpected connection. He was a man transformed. The gratitude for his project had opened his heart, and Neve had walked right in. He was on the path to redemption, not just as an academic, but as a man. He just didn't know that the final test, the biggest plot twist of all, was still to come. He was falling in love with a woman of secrets, and the revelation of those secrets would either be the foundation of their future or the thing that tore it all apart. Just as Brandon was navigating the new, uncharted territory of his feelings for Neve, the university administration threw a massive wrench into the works. The dean, overwhelmed with gratitude and eager for a public relations victory, decided that the anonymous benefactor simply had to be honored. He announced the university would be holding a grand gala, a lavish affair to publicly thank the donor who had funded both the scholarship and Brandon's world-changing research project. The guardian angel was about to be thrust into the spotlight. The announcement sent a ripple of excitement through the campus, but for Neve, it was a summons. The dean reached out through the secure email address, pleading with the donor to attend. He argued that their presence would inspire others, that it was a chance to celebrate a truly historic moment for the university. He had no idea he was putting his quietest student in an impossible position. Neve was now at a crossroads. Her secret had been her shield, but now she was being asked to lower it. The decision weighed heavily on her. To reveal her identity would be to change everything. Forever. She would no longer be just Neve, the brilliant student. She would once again become Neve Howard, the billionaire heiress. Her friendships, her relationships, everything she had built on the foundation of anonymity would be tested. The thought of losing that hard-won authenticity was painful. She had wanted to be seen for her mind, not her net worth. and this gala felt like a step backward. Most importantly, she thought of Brandon. How would he react? He was just beginning to see her. They were building something real, something based on mutual respect and burgeoning affection. If he discovered she was the secret billionaire who had orchestrated his dream, would he feel grateful or manipulated? Would he see her act of kindness as a gift or as the ultimate power play? Their fragile, nascent love story hung in the balance, and her decision could shatter it completely. She wrestled with the choice for days. To stay hidden would be to preserve the quiet life she had grown to love, but it also felt like hiding. To step forward would be to embrace her full self, power. And all, but at what cost? It was a test of her courage, a moment that would define her future and the future of her relationship with Brandon. The destiny she had tried to escape was calling her back, asking her to integrate the billionaire with the student. Ultimately, her decision came down to a simple, powerful truth. Hiding was no longer an option. She had to own her power, her kindness, and her choices. She had to trust. Trust in her friends, trust in the person Brandon was becoming, and most of all, trust in herself. With a deep breath, she replied to the dean's email with a single word, "I'll be there." The stage was set for the biggest surprise of the year. The night of the gala was a spectacle of sparkling lights and nervous energy. The entire university was buzzing, everyone eager to finally meet their mysterious guardian angel. Brandon, looking dapper in a tuxedo, was chosen to give the keynote speech of gratitude. His project was the centerpiece of the benefactor's generosity. After all, as he stood at the podium, he scanned the crowd, his eyes briefly finding Neve, who looked stunning in a simple, elegant gown. He gave her a small, warm smile, his heart filled with a mix of love for her and gratitude for the anonymous donor. He began to speak, and his voice was filled with a raw, genuine emotion that captivated the entire room. He spoke of his dream, of the despair he felt when he thought it was lost, and of the overwhelming hope the donation had given him. "I don't know who you are," he said, his voice thick with feeling, looking out at the sea of faces. "But you have done more than fund a project. You have restored my faith in the power of kindness. You have changed my life, and I will spend the rest of my career being worthy of your trust." It was a beautiful, heart-aching tribute. As the applause thundered through the hall, the dean stepped up to the microphone, a triumphant smile on his face. "Professor Reynolds, your words are beautiful, and I believe it's time for your thanks to be directed to the right person." A hush fell over the crowd. The moment of revelation had arrived. Brandon stood by the podium, his heart pounding in anticipation. Who was it? A wealthy alumnus? A tech mogul? The surprise was seconds away. "It is my immense honor," the dean boomed, "to ask our benefactor to come to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the woman responsible for this incredible generosity, Miss Neve Howard." For a second, there was silence as 1,000 minds tried to process the name. Then, a collective gasp swept through the room. As Neve, the quiet student from Professor Reynolds' class, stood up from her table and began to walk toward the stage. Brandon just stood there, frozen, his mind a complete blank. It felt like the world had stopped spinning. Neve Howard? His Neve? The student he had humiliated. The student he had accused of cheating. The student he was falling in love with. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place with the force of a physical blow. The brilliant reports, the impossible kindness, the connection to his parents, the secret net worth. It was all her. The student he underestimated was the hero of his story all along. She reached the stage, shaking the dean's hand, and turned to face the stunned audience, her gaze finally landing on Brandon. He was speechless, his face a mask of shock, awe, and dawning realization. The ultimate plot twist had just been revealed in the most public way imaginable. The love story, the redemption, the overcoming, it all culminated in this one unbelievable moment. The professor, the student, The secret, the billionaire. Everything was now out in the open, and nothing would ever be the same again. What an incredible journey that was. From a single painful moment of humiliation in a lecture hall, to a stunning revelation at a gala that left everyone speechless. We witnessed the complete transformation of Professor Brandon Reynolds, a man who had to have his entire world turned upside down to finally open his heart. And we saw the quiet, unshakable strength of Neve Howard, a secret billionaire who taught us that the greatest power lies not in net worth, but in kindness, integrity, and a profound capacity for forgiveness. Their story is a powerful, heart-aching reminder that true redemption is possible, that overcoming our own prejudices is the greatest challenge of all, and that a truly epic love story can blossom in the most unexpected of circumstances. It shows us that destiny isn't always a straight line sometimes. It's a beautiful, complicated plot twist that leads us exactly where we need to be. The journey of this professor and his student is proof that the best lessons in life are learned not from books, but from the heart. Now we want to hear from you. This story was filled with so many emotional moments, and your perspective is what brings it all to life. If this story of surprise and destiny touched you, please take a moment to like this video. It tells us we're on the right track and helps our channel grow. In the comments below, we'd love for you to share what part of the story impacted you the most. Was it the sting of the public humiliation? The shock of the final reveal? And tell us, did you expect this ending, or did you hope for a different outcome? Please, don't forget to follow our channel to join our community and get more stories like this one. We encourage you to check out some of our older videos, as well there are many more journeys to discover. Thank you for being here with us today. And be sure not to miss our next video, because you never know what surprise is waiting.